Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us wherever in the world you are dialing in from. We are incredibly grateful to have you here for the first pit stop of the Engine Room. We are now just 1 week away from the ECOSOC Youth Forum, and this session is designed to equip you with insight and inspiration that is needed to make the most of this key global moment and others that are coming throughout the year. For those of you who are not yet familiar or keen for a refresh, the Engine Room, hosted by the UN Foundation and supported by the Unlock the Future Coalition, works to do a couple of things. Number one, we want to drive action and influence in the global agenda ahead of key moments, like the ECOSOC Youth Forum in a week. We want to spotlight the work of young changemakers, and we'll hear from a few of them today. We want to lead and contribute to opportunities for young people to be truly heard in the global agenda. And we want to mobilize for key global moments in our 4 pit stops this year, which is the ECOSOC Youth Forum, the High Level Political Forum, and the SDG Summit and COP28, all of which have their own unique value throughout the year. You will notice that the word mobilize comes up a lot, as we do want to make sure that we're not just talking the talk, but we are really helping to empower and equip each and every one of you to be beacons of action in your community and in your country. So much of this great work is already underway across the Engine Room, across our 8 action groups in the lead up to the ECOSOC Youth Forum. And we're going to hear from a few of those young change makers today, as well as from our very own Hashani Dharmadasa later in this session, where she will give us a strategic outlook on these incredible moments. You will also have the chance to hear from leading thinkers, activists in some of our deep dives, including one on education, which we have seen to be such a huge priority for young people, as well as hearing from 2 incredible leaders to share their personal journeys on impact and resilience as a young change maker. Now, I can see some of you posting in the chat. I'm loving seeing people share where they're from, so I encourage you to do that. Please say hi, introduce yourself, say where you're dialing in from. I am coming to you from Darug country in Sydney, Australia. And now, to kick us off, we are going to hear from 2 fantastic leaders with great and rich insight into how to make impact in the UN system. We have Wang Lei, who is the UN Representative and Executive Director for US Global Advocacy for Save the Children. Having been with the organization for over 16 years, she has a wealth of experience that she can use to help guide us on how to make impact and also share a bit about the work that she's doing. We will also hear from Richard Gupta, who is CEO of the Labia Foundation, an SDG young leader and a board member of UNICEF India. So needless to say, both of these incredible leaders are well-versed and well-equipped to give us some guidance today. So with that being said, I will pass to Wang Lei to share a bit about her work.
Thank you so much, Taylor, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. It's such a great pleasure actually to join today's discussion, and I would say I always so impressed, I think, by the quality of conversation from the young leaders, especially I think in things we started to engage with the Unlock and the youth leaders. And if I look back in terms of when I was probably at your age, I'm definitely not where you are today. And but we definitely, I think, share probably the inner drive and the passion to bring change. So as Taylor shared, I'm the UN representative and the executive director to lead Save the Children's work here, representing Save the Children's influence and advocacy work towards the UN, which you probably know, Save the Children is one of the leading child rights organizations. We do have both humanitarian development work as well direct program work at the front line, and program work in many of the countries where you are present today, but also we do policy and influence work at the global level in different platforms, which including here with UN systems kind of headquartered in New York. Yeah. So with the topic today, I think in terms of this year, it's a really, really important year. I think for the sustainable development goal, it's coming into the middle point. And it is super important for Save the Children, and I think share probably with a lot of you in terms of why this is important. I don't have to say in terms of explain the rationale of why it's important, because the SDG framework is the one and the only one we got. actually, looking at a comprehensive framework to ensure human beings and planet, and then have a sustainable future. And then when we looking into, from Save the Children perspective, that children's lens, and children will be kind of in a way which, if the framework is progress well, they will be the one who have a future, and they will be benefit. And they will be also the ones who left out first when we have seen how COVID and other events have been impacted off track a lot of SDGs and so on. So what I'm going to do, I think, is just quickly to show you how Save the Children is planning and approaching some of those major opportunities this year. Then from that, I hope give you just a kind of sense, and then also spark a bit in terms of your thinking of how you're going to utilize opportunities coming kind of this year to really make a big difference for young people, as well, I think, for all people in the planet, in terms of to have that sustainable future. I'm going to just quickly share my screen. Let me know if you are able to see it. Yeah, okay, great. So quickly, in terms of, this is, Taylor also mentioned a bit earlier, there's a lot of things happening this year. So this is slides which we're using in Save the Children internally, try to capture how different opportunities and how we're going to work, I think, also both at the global level with different thematic areas, different thematic focus, but also have a really, I think, in terms of correspondence on some of the national level work, because sometimes we always say, in terms of, we have a great discussion here in New York and we have agreement, but if nothing really gets implemented at the national level, nothing will change, because fundamentally we need to take whatever action we agree at the global level and then turning that into proper actions, turning them into proper resources and funding as well. Actually, we can hold the government accountable into implementation. In that way, that's the only way we can really make a real change on the ground. So I think, in terms of, one of the core focus for Save the Children this year will be focused really on financing, kind of in terms of, anything big goals and framework and the commitment without a proper financing support, that will not be a realistic. So our overarching finance kind of policy ask is going to be very much focused on financing, and especially the financing focus on in terms of both, I think, on the climate space, but also in terms of the development and prioritizing for, especially, for example, some of the areas like social protection, etc., and the essential services. So some of the so then you will see, in terms of, right now is a financing for development forum are happening actually right now this week. And then the World Bank Spring meeting, that's a forum which happening every year, is a very relevant, I think, kind of process which are focused on the financial institution kind of debate coming in with the Youth Forum in April. And then they will have other climate related financing moments which are not kind of in New York, but in other space. For example, the Macron Financing Forum coming in June, and then the Bonn Climate Conference, etc. So, and then going on to High-Level Political Forum in July, and then thinking about the SDG Summit in September, high-level dialogue on financing for development also happening the same time in UNHCR. And then going, actually, it doesn't stop at that point. After UNHCR, the SDG Summit, will then move into kind of to COP, and then to Summit of Future discussion for next year. So the reason why I want to show these slides is, and then you have also in terms of, maybe here, combined with, we are planning for a Children's Action Week will be taking place in multiple countries. And then that's a way how we're going to mobilize children and young people actually taking action on their own rights. And then they lead to demands, especially for policymakers, for national authorities to making proper commitment when it comes to September, the SDG summit during the UNGA high-level week. So because one of the key things for the SDG summit this year will be around commitment making and accelerating of deliver of the SDGs. So anything actually we can push at the capital level that will result, I think, a better, probably a more productive in terms of outcome in September. And then as well, another engagement kind of moment of coming in, I think, September, kind of thinking about the people's assembling and so on. So that just kind of gives you a sense of how we are thinking about utilizing some of the SDG related process, but meanwhile also pair up with other processes like COP and the financing for development, meanwhile linking up with particular action at the national level, especially young people drive action at the national level to push for commitment. Finally, before I close, I think in terms of we also have a couple of products which we aim to kind of support those efforts. We're doing what we call the Child Atlas, which is basically a data set which really apply with a children's lens, and then to examine how countries are doing with child kind of centered SDG target, and then also with a solution kind of coming in terms of pair up with data and the situation. Meanwhile, also we'll be having function which the capture young people's comments, and then in terms of their suggestion for this, in terms of their suggestion of how the particular government and international government and community level can take in different actions and so on. Yeah, I stop there. Taylor, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Wang Lei. And I know that we feel a similar way, which is we could talk about these topics for so long because they're so important. But what we're hearing from what you're explaining is that we have this series of global moments that are like dominoes for these moments of commitment for accelerating the SDGs. So while for everyone on this call, it may feel overwhelming how many events there are, it's why we've picked our 4 key pit stop moments for us to be able to focus and anchor our work into. But for now, I will pass to Richa Gupta, who's going to share a bit more about her experiences in some of the youth engagement pathways coming into the ECOSOC Youth Forum.
Absolutely. Thank you, Taylor, and thank you so much for sharing earlier. And my name is Richa. I'm from India, but I'm sitting in London right now, and essentially a teacher turned entrepreneur, spent about a decade teaching in low-income classrooms, now run a nonprofit called Livelihoods, like Taylor mentioned, and we work with state governments in India across towards children's well-being and social emotional learning in a systemic way. And I'm also one of the 17 young leaders for the Sustainable Development Goals, working directly with the UN headquarters for the next 2 years, in a cohort that's actually very diverse, from young people who are extremely accomplished and amazing from across the world, who are now trying to change the systems and the processes that currently don't enable young people, and now will because of people like us and everyone on this call today. So very quickly, I know we don't have much time, but the lead up to the ECOSOC Youth Forum has been very amazing for young people like myself. We have been doing online consultations with young people, hundreds of young people from across the globe right now on the Spark Blue platform. If some of you, I think I see on the call, have been contributing to those consultations, and we've been summarizing them, we've been going through them, we've been trying to see how we could use those insights from young people from across the globe to use them as main agenda points across the engagements that young people will have with the UN and beyond throughout the year. So that has been an extremely crucial and important part of the journey that has led up to the Youth Forum. The second is that as a cohort of young SDG leaders, we will be there across the forum in the next week and through almost all other events happening in the year, to make sure that young people are able to access these platforms either online, virtually, or in hybrid or in person as much as possible, to make sure that our voices are heard in a very inclusive way. And we will be leading local consultations like we have been in the past to make sure that the conferences and the spaces that we create are truly inclusive and speak to the needs that we talk about. A quick glimpse into some of the interesting insights that have come out from the consultations in the past week have been the need for youth-focused programming and funding, sort of thing that we need better frameworks to measure the impact that young people have on the field, on the ground, and how we can develop their leadership. There's a big need for mentorship for young people that we have sensed from the young people in the past couple of weeks. And so all of these have been really, really good insights. And of course, theme-specific insights on climate, resilience, emotional well-being of children, education, women's rights. So some very interesting conversations have come up from there as well. Just before I close, some of the big opportunities this year for young people on this call, and in general, people who work with young people represent on this call could be really pivotal. Firstly, right now is a very good time for young people to engage in these spaces because we have so many spaces opening up. We just saw a slide with all the engagements happening with the UN this year, specifically the SDG framework. If you're an entrepreneur working with ESG goals, lots of governments and corporates are now looking at this framework to engage with young people more and more. Generation Unlimited, which is also the board on which I sit on in India, have been working tirelessly for young people. So if there is a chapter in your country that is a GenU chapter, please engage with them, work with them. Teach for All will be at the UN ECOSOC Forum. I see Sanai on the call right now as well, working a lot around young people and how we could represent young people at these spaces. We have the 17 SDG young leaders who are here to support in any which way. And of course, the local UN offices, the UNGA. There's also the Sustainability Impact Forum happening in Milan this year, which will have some important points around young people's engagement and why we need to be in these spaces and a wonderful impact that all of us are creating together. So if there is a chance, I think there's a pitch competition also happening in these forums. So just as opportunities for you to access, we are here to support and very, very excited and hope that all of this comes to fruition as we look back at the end of the year. Thank you so much. Back to you, Taylor. Hope that helped.
Thank you so much, Richa. And yes, it absolutely did help. It's great to hear from young leaders like Richa, who, like our Next Generation Fellows, will be at the ECOSOC Youth Forum to amplify the voices of young people. We will also hear a bit more about the consultations that Richa mentioned when we hear from Hashani a little bit later. And we also have good news about virtual participation in the ECOSOC Youth Forum, which we will also share later on, not to give you too many teasers, but there is good news coming your way. But for now, we have the benefit of getting this strategic insight from Richa and Wang Lei, which we're very grateful for, and we will hear from them again in just a few minutes, but we're going to dive into hearing directly from 3 members of the Engine Room who, just like you, just like everybody on this call, joined this space in the hope of making an impact. And they are now here to share a bit about their ideas, their progress so far, and their reflections on the Engine Room experience. We will be starting with the incredible Felipe Bosch, who is a member of the Future Generations Action Group working on Youth for Foresight. Over to you, Felipe. You are on mute. It's happened to all of us. We seem to be having just a few technical issues with Felipe's audio, so we're going to give him a minute and we will pass to Esther if she is ready while he gets a moment or two. Esther, I hope you're ready for us to pass to you. Oh, no need. We can keep regular order. Felipe, I think I hear you. Can you give us a hello?
Yeah, you can hear me now.
Perfect. No need to reorder. Straight across to you.
Okay. Thank you. I was thanking you, Taylor, and your incredible fellows and the team at UN Foundation for inviting me to provide some insights of our progress. As you have told our audience today, I'm leading an initiative as a Future Generations Action Group innovator. And our goal somehow is to set up a community of young foresight practitioners in the making, and empower young people to create intergenerational spaces where we can, as young people, invite decision makers, multilateral institutions, governments, private sector, to sit at the table and discuss through foresight exercises led by us, young people, our topics of interest, confronting those interests that are related to the present, to urgencies, and those interests that are more related to the future. And the idea is that in these intergenerational spaces, we can make emerge new visions for just and sustainable futures, and backcast past paths that we can follow, and then reach those futures that we have envisioned. We are 15 young people from all over the world. I'm from Argentina, but living right now in Brussels, Belgium. I see some of my friends and colleagues in the chat. They are coming from Burundi, Democratic Republic of Congo, France, India, Mexico, Nigeria, Russia, Rwanda, the United States, and Wales. And we're right now working at different fronts. So we have conducted some initial interviews to understand a little bit the different relationships of young people across the world to the future and to decision making. A worldwide survey will follow. And from there, thanks to those inputs, we will create or design this toolkit. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We know that already many great people around are working on foresight with young people and on different toolkits. So we want to see which ones would make more sense for these intergenerational spaces that we want to create. And the idea is that from these spaces, in an innovative and meaningful way, can come out recommendations for the road towards the UN Summit of the future. And we also think that perhaps, I mean, why not? Our toolkit could become an interesting tool for future Economic and Social Council youth forums or other kind of spaces such as this one. Perhaps, I don't know how many, I'm only having 30 seconds, so some lessons learned in the process and insights that we believe that could be taken into account when creating the impact roadmap for the SDG Summit and thinking about these spaces in which young people will be invited to share the recommendations. I think that we need to understand that the present and the future don't imply a zero-sum game. I mean, as young people, we do understand that in the face of urgencies or difficult socioeconomic contexts, we might need to make decisions hard and that might be damaging for the future. But we also feel that we need to overcome such supposed tensions. And overcoming those tensions could be possible through gathering together and creating new visions and new paths. And I would say, let's avoid, I mean, incorporating the same old assumptions, the same old biases of the systems that structure our worlds today. We need to open up space for strategic, frank, even confrontational dialogue from which we could start co-creating these alternative visions for sustainable and just futures. And for creating a world that, in spite of climate shocks, technological upheavals, everyone can be able to thrive from right now, from the very beginning of this path that we need to take together today. So thank you a lot, and I'm glad to meet all of you and discuss with you about futures and how to create these intergenerational spaces.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And we are now passing to Esther Ajedirunu, who is in the Jobs Action Group working on skills-oriented education. Over to you, Esther.
Hi, everyone. I'm Esther, and I'm really glad to be here. So I'm a young change maker from Nigeria, an MBA candidate, and a social entrepreneur. Growing up, I never had access to the right career advisory, so I found myself studying a course which I had no interest in, and this resulted in frustration and grades below my capabilities. Upon graduation, I was
Unfortunately, it looks like we are having a little technical difficulty with Esther. We'll just give her a few moments to see if we get her back. And if not, Seyafunmi, if you could be ready to start.
African region.
Esther, we just lost you for a few moments there, but do keep going.
Coming across Okay, so across the big brainstorm, I decided to join the Jobs Action Group, and I am now leading the African Youth Mentorship Initiative with other young global leaders. Now, the objective of the project is to reach out to over 1,000 young people in secondary schools across Africa by the SDG Summit who are choosing their career paths to help them make more informed choices and reduce the risk of unemployment and underemployment. Leveraging the Jobs Action Group, we have secured volunteer outreach coordinators from 6 Africans in different countries to enable us to reach the grassroots communities. Right now, each coordinator is developing an outreach strategy based on their context, and we are developing an overall outreach curriculum, which we want to collaborate on with other mentorship initiatives that action group members are leading in Nepal and elsewhere. Across the rest of the Jobs Action Group, there has been a lot happening. As I mentioned, we are collaborating across our action group, and myself and 2 other innovators, Soshmina and Damaris, are forming a peer mentorship group to collaborate and build our networks, because we are all working on youth mentorship and skills program in different countries. Our Jobs Action Group also contributes ideas together on youth job priorities and recommendations for an insight paper submission to the ECOSOC Youth Forum coming up. We also formed the Storytelling and Communications Task Force to work on campaigns leading up to the SDG Summit. In closing, I'd like to share that every young person deserves access to financial freedom, regardless of ethnicity, religion, or race. And we can achieve this by providing them with information and guidance to assess careers. Education accompanied by mentorship gives young people higher chances to become employable. Youth are the strength of every nation. Hence, this is a wake-up call to everyone, particularly young people, that the solution to youth employment, which we all long for, lies in our hands. It is time for us to take charge by participating in the upcoming ECOSOC Youth Forum and leveraging the engine room ahead of the SDG Summit to collaborate and create the solutions we wished we had access to when we were the younger ones, as this will facilitate a thriving and more progressive society. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share what we are working on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Esther. I can tell I'm not the only one who's incredibly inspired by what you shared. The chat is full of excitement, but last and certainly not least, we have Seyfunmi Adbote, who's from the Financing Action Group, to share his work and his group's work on the Young Changemakers podcast.
I'm afraid I can't hear any feedback right now. Am I audible, please?
Yes, you are.
Great. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Taylor. Thanks, Felipe and Esther. It's so good to hear from you. I can see the passion in your voice, and it's sort of ignited my passion again. So I'm Seyfunmi Adbote. I'm representing the amazing folks that we work together in developing the SDG Innovators podcast under the Finance Action Group. And what we aim to do with the SDG Innovators podcast is that we want it to be a platform for young voices. We want to offer inspiration and guidance and meaningful references to thousands of young people out there that are really interested in exploring sustainable development, both at local, regional, and global level. And this is important this year more than ever before, because we know that it's a build-up to the SDG Summit, and we need to really inspire and mobilize many more young people around the world at a rate that will match the ambitions that we have as young people for a better world. And our idea, I'm excited because over the last few weeks, our idea is gradually taking shape. From just being an idea, we're giving life to that idea. And thanks to all my group members, thanks to all the, by extension, members of the engine room for bringing so much energy, inspiration, and vibes to the team. I'm really grateful indeed. And we've been able to stay on track. We've been able to fine-tune our crude ideas, and now it's becoming something tangible. So far, we've designed like our logo, we've researched and created a list of over 50 young thinkers and activists that we will be interviewing in the coming days. And we're very confident that the stories of these young people can inspire many more people to take action. We've also agreed on the styles of questions that we wish to ask, and we hope that these questions can probe some very real life stories of innovators that we can share with the world. My message to you, other young change makers in this engine room, is whether you're joining the call for the first time or you've been actively part of it, I would love to say that you should explore the strength of your group members. Do not overwork yourself. I know it could be stressful sometimes, but you've got innovative, creative, and available group members that you should tap into those strengths. And I hope that the panel discussion today, as well as the Fireside chat that will follow, will be able to answer some of the questions that you have, because I know as a creative myself, we have lots of questions from time to time. Before I round off, I want to say thank you to all my colleagues. Our team includes young people from the United States, Ghana, Pakistan, Uganda, India, Rwanda, Kenya, and I have a few fellow compatriots from Nigeria. I see some of them in the chat also. So it's so exciting to see this diverse group of people. And to state the obvious, the ECOSOC Youth Forum is about young people like me, like you and I. And the aim is to see that we can galvanize our voices, raise a lot of actions, and together we can transform the world. And we are hoping that with the SDG Innovators podcast, we can play a little role in that. So again, you can tell from my voice, I'm so excited about this. We're ready to roll. And I hope that I can also have chats with some of you, share your stories. And I'm really excited for us to do this together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Funmi and Felipe and Esther, for sharing your experiences. As someone who participated in the engine room equivalent last year, it brings me so much joy and excitement to see you all getting the same experience, and I hope lots of people listening to this call. Before we let Wang Lei and Richard go, we're going to capitalize on their expertise for a few more minutes. So Wang Lei, I'd love to pass back to you for any reflections, guidance, or feedback you'd like to share after those presentations.
Thank you so much, Taylor. I share with you in terms of, after I hear the presentation from the three young change makers, I including also Richard as well, in terms of there are so many great ideas. I can feel so much energy, and you are definitely doing a great job. You are in I think in terms of, a right direction. So a couple of quick thoughts from my end. Number one, I think you should keep whatever you're doing, and in terms of, in either small or big kind of areas where you are actually making direct change with people of your community, and then as well with the reaction. So that's for me, that's the goal of when we are in this world talking about so much big topics and making big speeches in the UN. It's that's the golden in terms of what we have in this community. That's number one. Number two, I think it's about we're doing today. It's about building communities and inspire more people, and also get inspiration from others. So I think we are continue utilize the space we have. We already have a great community here. I'm sure around you there are other young people, they want to get engaged. I'm sure you can inspire them, and also to in terms of get inspiration from others as well. Finally, I think coming back to the processes in the UN and so on, they are different processes. I think whatever your idea and what you have proposed here will be useful, I think, for the policymaker. There are platforms like this one, and through the UN Foundation and others, ready platforms for you to engage. But I think what you should do is also to demand as well, in terms of both, I think, in the UN level, but most importantly also in the national level, because on your own respective rights, you all have your access to different policymakers, and everyone is an active citizen. So be really, I think, pushing of whatever national government commitment and hold them accountable. That's going to make the biggest difference. And yeah, so keep going, and there will be organization like Save the Children and UN Foundation and others will be there to support you. And feel free, I think, to reach out to all of us if you need any assistance and support on the journey. And we will be very happy to work together and achieve this change together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wang Lei. And Wang Lei is a woman in demand, so she's going to have to leave us now, but thank you so much for your time. And, you know, what I'm hearing is a really key point in what you're saying is, yes, keep your passion, unite with others, invest in the community, and also demand from our leaders that sort of commitment and the follow through. A lot of what we're seeing, you know, Richard, for example, in the insights paper and the consultations that you contributed to is wanting to make sure that the recommendations from young people are treated with the respect and consideration and long-term follow-up that other types of recommendations are. But with that, Richard, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. Thank you, Taylor. And thank you, Wang Lei, for sharing her incredible insights. I think agree with you. So firstly, thank you to all three of you and all the teams that you have been working with for the incredible work and progress that you have made. Please keep at it. It's extremely inspiring and energizing to hear all the wonderful work that you're doing. So keep going, and really grateful to Engine Room for creating these spaces. And I hope more and more young people come in and participate and take leadership in these spaces, because it's incredible. Three quick sort of points and thoughts that I had. The first is of alignment. So I heard intergenerational dialogue, need for mentorship and career orientation, and financial freedom. And I think for all three, it's extremely important to align the work that you're already doing on ground with real young people on the day-to-day with what's happening nationally and internationally. So for example, Generation Unlimited has a big focus on mentorship, especially in countries like India, and I'm sure in other partner countries also. So try to go over these partnership platforms that are already meant for young people and are doing some things for young people, and they're looking for innovators like you to propose solutions that are working at the local level. And I think that's the power that you have. So align your work with the national and international policies, the dialogue that's happening in spaces such as these, because they need insights from you. The second is proximity. I think the biggest power that all of you have and all of us young people have is that we are closest to the people that we want to serve. And being close to them gives us a superpower, which is the authenticity of sharing the needs and also the challenges and also the opportunities. So continue to do that, and please keep sharing through consultations, through all of these platforms, the actual issues and what we can do, like Esther very articulately, of course, and all three of you actually shared. The third is sustainability. Do think about sustainability of our programs. Many times as young people, because we have changing priorities and various challenges, we start things and then we are not able to follow through. So this is extremely important. Some of the most exceptional young leaders that I know and I'm surrounded by have stuck through the path and have continued to do the work that they do, even though it was challenging and they had to scale up or scale down during difficult times. But please continue to do that. Think about who is paying for your solution. How can you partner with governments? How can you make it more sustainable? How can you get corporate partners to come and support you? That's definitely the focus of the year this year for many partners and many government and non-government folks. So those are my three thoughts and some opportunities that might be helpful.
Thank you so much, Richard. And I'd love to just add one quick comment, which is, I think, and Inez has a similar experience for those who are familiar with her. I think I'm in my 9th or 10th year of youth advocacy, and I could not agree more. Sustainability is key. Often in that first year, it's a lot of groundwork, foundational work, finding your feet, finding where you can offer value. And sometimes it takes a few iterations to find that. And so if you approach that first year in a way that's not sustainable, you might not reach that second year, that third year, where you start to see the impact, where you have trusting partnerships and those relationships that can really scale your impact. So completely agree with what we've heard. And thank you so much, Richard, for offering your insights. Thank you again, Esther, Felipe, Sheafunmi, for presenting. And I'd also like to share that even if you didn't present during this section, these insights are so relevant to you. So please do reflect on how this might feed into either the idea that you have, the work that you're already doing, what your team is doing, maybe something a young change maker you hope to work with is doing, so you can offer your perspective on that. But from here, I'm very excited because we're going to get to zoom out a little bit more and get a bit more of a richer insight into the strategic landscape around these big moments like the ECOSOC Youth Forum. So with that, I will pass to Hashani.
Thank you so much, Taylor. I mean, wow, it was incredible to hear from all the innovators. I'm so truly inspired by your energy, your determination, and your creativity. It's exactly what the international system needs, your brilliance to really make sure that the UN system addresses deep concerns that are vital to our planet and humanity. So the ECOSOC Youth Forum is one of our pit stops for the SDG Summit. It's one of the main platforms for young people very, very early in the year to share their ideas and to engage with governments, businesses, and major international organizations like Save the Children ahead of the SDG Summit. And there are 3 other major pit stops on the road. They include the High-Level Political Forum, which is in July. Now, this is an opportunity to actually review a set of goals for this year. Many of them are climate-related goals. There's, of course, the SDG Summit itself in September, and then finally COP28. Now, why is the SDG Summit so important? You've heard about the 2030 Agenda, you've heard about these 17 goals, but why are they so important for young people? Well, we know that half the population is under 30, and that many young people live in marginalized and discriminated countries or communities that are often disconnected from these big global conversations about where the world must be in not just 1 year, but 5, 20, 30 years from now. And it's so vitally important that those conversations that are happening at the UN about the state of our world and the state of our future really resonates with young people's priorities. We really need to work together with and for young people to strike a new deal for a new generation, a global plan that tackles our most urgent priorities. And for the SDG Summit, this is a moment where heads of state, presidents, and prime ministers, as well as CEOs from big organizations, are coming together to really have those deep and meaningful conversations about the status quo and our future. And there's a vital imperative to have young thinkers, doers, activists, leaders just like you to be part of those conversations and really shift the global policy dialogue. It's not simply about having a seat at the table. We really need young people to really shape that policy agenda, to drive innovation and the delivery of solutions, just like we've heard from innovators today. And we need to strengthen partnerships between generations, which we've just heard so powerfully from Richa. It's a time for world leaders to catch up or risk being left behind. Now, there are 2 moments during the ECOSOC Youth Forum, which is, again, I mentioned our first pit stop, that I wanted to bring your attention to. The first is this mention that we've heard already about an insights paper. Now, this insights paper will be launched at the ECOSOC Youth Forum at 3 p.m. New York time on Thursday, April the 27th, during a session that actually focuses on what young people want for the SDG Summit. Now, this insights paper that you've heard and many of you have contributed to capture young people's priorities and recommendations across an online consultation that included over 200 young people that provided their insights and their guidance. And some of the big key takeaways from that insights paper and that consultation, which we've actually heard already, include 1, the necessity to mobilize early and politically with young people at the forefront, working actively with youth-led and youth-inclusive networks. Secondly, the importance of co-designing intergenerational dialogues, conversations, and moments with and together with young people. So when we're talking about the problems with tackling the learning crisis or our planetary emergency, those conversations are authentic. They're based on the lived experiences of all generations, particularly young people. We also, thirdly, need to encourage cross engagement and partnership with government, particularly young youth delegates that are in attendance, and advocate for their engagement, as well as young people from non-formal structures. This is really important to ensure, as Wang Lei mentioned, the importance of investing in national and local action in the SDGs. One of the fourth takeaways is the value of unlocking better financing and support for young people at all stages of SDG action. This includes research, advocacy, entrepreneurship, implementation and monitoring. And the additional component we've heard very loud and clear in the consultations is the value of investing in the mentoring and training and resourcing and capacity building of young people who are setting organizations that will last 20, 30, 50 years from now and will be tackling big, major future challenges. And then finally, the fifth big takeaway we've heard in the Insights paper and the consultations is the power of amplifying and profiling young heroes, young champions, such as yourself, to really underline that there is a sense of hope, that there is a sense of achievement in what we have accomplished in the last few years of the 2030 agenda, but we need to continue to invest in young people that are the real spirit of the 2030 agenda to really ensure we make good on the promises that we made in 2015 by 2030. The second big moment during the ECOSOC Youth Forum that I wanted to share is a moment on an event that's on the future of multilateralism that will be held as a side event on Wednesday, April the 26th at 6 p.m. Now, why this is, sorry, my cat is hopping behind me. Why this is such an important moment? Well, the Secretary General almost a year ago launched a high-level advisory board on multilateralism. And this board brought together some of the most inspiring, brilliant minds from civil society to think tanks and to governments. It was chaired by the former president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and former Swedish Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven. It also included a member of UN Foundation's Next Generation Fellow, Poonam Gamir, and that HLab, or that board, they discussed over a year on where should the UN be in 50 years' time, 100 years' time? What are the shifts and changes and radical moves we need to make now to address not only the problems that we experience now, but the problems we'll experience in the future? And how do we change the way that we interact in the international system? How do we change how we interact in the sort of world diplomacy and politics so that we can be better at international cooperation? And that session will reveal some of the key recommendations coming from that report. It will also seek to address some important questions that I feel are part of the conversations that we're having now, that include how can the international system improve the ways that it thinks and plans for young people and future generations. And it will also encourage the board and the attendees and the panelists to really explore how we can future-proof the UN. I also wanted to end by saying that the HLab recommendations have a strong youth focus. There's a concentration on the power of the new UN Youth Office to be a center of accountability towards youth in global decision-making. It also stresses the value of gender equality as one of the most pressing issues that should feature predominantly in the Summit of the Future in 2024. And then it also shares a recommendation on the importance of a pact for people and planet that can help set really ambitious and measurable targets to address our triple planetary crisis. So just to take a step back, the ECOSOC Youth Forum is one of the early moments for young people to mobilize intergenerationally on priorities that they face and they feel are of value and of credit and need amplification in this big moment of the SDG Summit. But it's also a big moment for how we think about the international cooperation and multilateral system as a whole. Now, I know there was a lot to digest, and I feel this is part of an evolving conversation that we'll continue to have with the engine room mobilization. We ask you to stay on the line with us and continue to mobilize with the action groups that you've heard from today, as well as others, and then to continue to be part of the conversation in our next, not just in the ECOSOC Youth Forum, but also in the high-level political forum that will be coming up in July. And so with that, I want to quickly wrap up. Thank you so much for your time. I wanted to hand over now to one of our UN Foundation Next Generation Fellows, who will start a conversation, a deep dive conversation on one of young people's top priorities, education, the crisis we see unfolding in our global education systems, and how we can reimagine our education structures to really accelerate the SDGs. Mai, over to you.
Thank you, Harshani. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to see you all participating. We have like over 100 participants in the sessions. So this is Mai, and I'm a Next Generation Fellow, and I'm also a Youth Fellow Advocacy Officer at the UN Save the Children New York Advocacy Office. So our session will be a deep dive on young people's priorities, education in crisis, and I just would like to remind you that we have a live Q&A function in this session. This session, the live Q&A function, you will see it at below your screen. You can submit your question and others can upvote the questions, and our team will screen the question and review them, and we will have it at the end segment of our session. So this year, ECOSOC Youth Forum is happening at a time when many countries are still dealing with the aftermath of the COVID-19 crisis, which has impacted the life of youth and children and their social and educational and economic activities. In this conversation, we have two amazing guests who will focus with us on education as an interconnected strategy for achieving the SDGs. I would like to welcome Ishaan and Foluyinka Fakoya. Ishaan is a 19-year-old co-founder of Stolen Dreams and the Youth for Freedom Collective. He is also a United Kingdom Youth Representative to the United Nations and a UN National Gender Youth Advocate. He's also a youth representative on the UN Network on Migration Civil Society Action Committee and a UNHCR Young Champion. Foluyinka Fakoya is a partnership specialist at the Global Partnerships for Education Global Advocacy team, where she leads on gender equality and advocacy and youth engagement. She joined GPE from the International Center for Research on Women, where she supported gender economic empowerment and livelihood portfolio. Foluyinka has also worked as a program officer at the Education Partnership Center in Nigeria, where she supported the scaling up of innovative education interventions. Ishaan and Foluyinka, thank you so much for joining us. Let's dive in. So, one of the greatest priorities of young people in the pre-ECOSOC consultation was education. In your opinion, why do you think this is so important and it's a priority? And what do you think the role of education is in unlocking the potential of young leaders and countries and the SDGs as a whole? Foluyinka, Ishaan, are you here with me?
Thanks so much, Mai. It's great to be here and great to be with you. And thanks to everyone who's gone before. It's been a really great and engaging session so far. Yeah, I think one of the reasons education came out so strongly as a priority of young people is because they can see the impact of education around them in their communities, in their countries, in their regions. They are coming out of school feeling unprepared, feeling that they are lacking skills, and they're seeing where the gaps are. We know that through education, especially a quality foundation, as well as relevant, having a relevant courses and relevant syllabuses. It's really important for young people to get the skills and the knowledge that they need, especially now that the world is changing. You know, we're seeing economic shifts. We're seeing, you know, that young people really need to be equipped. And unfortunately, there is a lot of failure at the systemic level where they're not receiving the kind of education that they need. And so I think we're seeing it as a priority because they are feeling the gaps. They're seeing it, and they're seeing where the systems could be improved. And we know that education is such you know, a key to unlocking the other SDGs. Schools are great hubs for sharing knowledge. They're hubs in communities. They're important for challenging gender stereotypes, you know, for encouraging children and students to think outside the box of what they are, of what they see, and to challenge some of these things they see in their communities. And they're also important for kind of, you know, thinking about infrastructure and skills, and they're just such big hubs for communities and beyond. And so I think young people are really seeing the gaps that you know, in the systems that they're in, and are really beginning to hold their leaders accountable. We know that there are a lot of commitments, including at the Transforming Education Summit last year. So young people want to know what's going on with that. You know, what are the next steps? Where is the implementation from their leaders?
Amazing. Thank you so much. Ishaan?
Yeah,
welcome.
sorry. Thank you for having me. Just want to echo everything that's been said, but also to add, it's not just about quality education, but it's quality gender transformative education. I think is important. Looking at, you know, education beyond the conventional sense and seeing how can we use education as a tool to dismantle, you know, patriarchal norms, stereotypes, and power imbalances as well. And I think this is one of the main priorities that we've seen also throughout our work with UN Women, but also engagement with the Transforming Education Summit, was that, you know, how can we really deliver on gender transformative education? What does it actually mean in practice? And that does include education on comprehensive sexual education and on section health and reproductive rights. And I think it's beyond just looking at our education curriculums, but looking at the structural and systemic factors and how those come into play. Particularly noting as well that actually education is one of those foundational blocks of the SDGs, and education is a tool to advance gender equality. It is a tool to reduce poverty. It's a tool to combat modern slavery and human trafficking even, and child marriage. So, you know, it's about having that safe, accessible, sustainable, and gender transformative access to education that is lifelong as well, not just targeted towards children, but to all people, and in particular to young women and women and girls in all their diversity and intersectional identities too.
Thank you so much for your honor. So as we said, I would like to direct this question to Foluyinka, and then I would like to have Ishaan input on this question. So as we said, our sites on the SDG Summit, many of the conversations being had centered around the need to break down the soils between the Sustainable Development Goals. Quality education is a great example of a goal that has substantial interdependencies across all the 17 goals. How can we advancing quality education, how to make it a part of the interconnected strategy for achieving the SDGs?
Thanks so much, Maya. And that's such a great question. And I think I really like how you said about the interdependencies of education. And that's something that really has become clear through the COVID pandemic, through we're looking at the impact of climate events, and when schools are not safe because there's been a flood, or for example, the impact of Cyclone Freddy, which has kept children out of school, partly because buildings have been damaged, and also because schools are being used as shelters, you know. So we're really, I mean, some of these things, I mean, just in the last few years that we've seen have really showed the interconnectedness and the interdependencies of the education system, the health system, the economic system. We're really seeing how all these play together. And so that brings, you know, that prioritizes collaboration across sectors, both even at both at the national level and at the region level, but also at the global level as well. We have to be thinking about all these things together. We can't think about sort of SDG 4 and SDG 6, right? Because, for example, we need to have clean water in schools. We need to have sanitation facilities in schools, especially when we think about girls and mental health management and so on. So really, there's a clear and increasing need for there to be a collaborated approach. And we know the impact of education. We know that, as Ishaan mentioned, we know the impact of education on earnings. We know that, you know, when girls are educated, that increases their earnings, and globally that can increase earnings by up to 30 trillion. We know that with quality education, that reduces poverty. We know that increases with access to education, that increases gender equality, because that can be, you know, gender equality both in the school environment, but also gender equality through education that goes beyond school and goes into communities and societies and throughout the lifetime of girls and women. And so, you know, these interdependencies are something that are becoming clearer and clearer. And so one thing that we're doing at GPE is really working, you know, with other organizations across sectors to think about how can we take a holistic and a comprehensive approach. So for example, GPE is part of the School Meals Coalition that's looking at school feeding programs, but also thinking about homegrown school meals. How do you stimulate the local economy to provide the schools to provide the meals for the schools? That means you're supporting farmers, you're supporting cooks. That creates employment all around the hub of the school. And so thinking about taking that more comprehensive and holistic approach is really critical for moving forward and for ensuring that we are really leveraging the power of education, the transformative power of education, to change lives and to ensure that every child has the opportunity to achieve their full potential.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to move to the live Q&As because we received a lot of questions. I have the first question is for Ishaan. So the question is it the failure of education not stemming from pre-COVID? Hence, what are we doing to ensure we think outside the box to avoid mistakes of the past in education? Ishaan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sorry, my internet is a bit funny today. I think, yeah, the failings and the limitations to education globally stem from before COVID. For sure, COVID exacerbated the structural inequalities, marginalizations, the violence even that were being disproportionately felt by women and girls in particular. But in terms of the education crisis, for sure, I think we cannot talk about education without referencing Afghanistan at the moment. I think it's important to see that, you know, COVID impacted Afghanistan in so many ways, and yet conflict and the takeover of Taliban has impacted education further. Women and girls cannot access education. They cannot access work at the moment. It's not even a silencing of women and girls in Afghanistan. It's an erasure completely of women and girls from all spheres of life. So I think these are structural failings that have always been in existence in education. Not only, you know, and even in contexts like where I am in the UK, for example, we have severe structural flaws to our education system in terms of service delivery, in terms of the curriculum, in terms of information that's being provided, in terms of even safety for children in settings of education. And these have been exacerbated by COVID-19. They are going to be exacerbated by climate change. They are already being exacerbated by climate change and conflicts. They're being exacerbated by gender inequalities, by oppressive regimes, by all sorts of different aspects. And then again, that links to the intersectionality and the intersectional nature of this. And I think groups and organizations who have convening power, like GP, for example, and the high-level steering committee of the Transforming Education Summit, and you have Education Cannot Wait. I think those are incredible platforms to bring together intergenerational partners as well, and really catalyze that action, because we are in an education crisis, and at the moment it's not getting any better, and we have to commit to, well, it's moving beyond commitments, it's moving beyond compliance, and it's transforming those words and pledges that are being made, you know, every other week by member states, by the private sector, by civil society organizations into concrete action. can achieve that by looking at really
Ishaan, your voice is breaking up.
the structural mechanisms that. Sorry, am I back?
Okay. Yeah, you're back now.
I'll quickly wrap up. I'll just say that to address those structural and systemic issues that continue to perpetuate those discrimination, marginalization, and vulnerabilities that exist within our education systems.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So we have a lovely interaction from the participants here. We have a lot of questions. So this question is for Foluyinka. The question is, according to you, what are the basics we must have to clear about the ethics, and how can we involve officially and have an exact roadmap?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Claire. What are the basics?
So according to you, what are the basics we must have to clear about the ethics, and how can we involve officially and have an exact roadmap?
Sure. So I can talk a little bit about sort of GPE's approach and how we work with our country partners. And one thing that we do in GPE is we are very much country-led. We're not interested in something where we come up with ideas from the Secretariat and try to implement them, but we really listen to countries about what are their priorities, what are the issues that they want to that they want our support to address, and how do they really want to transform their education systems. So for example, GPE works in the Kyrgyz Republic, where they were really keen on expanding access to quality early learning. And so through a grant and through a project there, we now have 10,000 extra students enrolled in community-based kindergarten. So those are really an example of how we kind of take a really, from our perspective, a really ethical approach and make sure that we're being country-led, make sure that we're supporting countries to address the challenges that they have identified. In terms of having a roadmap, I'm not sure if this relates specifically to sort of the global moments, but I think we got a really great overview from Wang Lei about how SAVE is approaching some of these global public policy moments, these really key moments for continued and strong advocacy to world leaders about the importance of education, the importance of engaging young people, and the importance of ensuring that, you know, we're creating opportunities for young people to meaningfully feed into these processes. And I think at GPE, we have a similar roadmap. A lot of the moments you highlighted were the same for us. And we encourage young people to really leverage the Unlock Coalition and some of the opportunities that were also shared earlier to get involved. Thanks.
Amazing, thank you. So we have another question for you from Philippe. It's about GPE, and he's asking if GPE is interested in enhancing future literacy systems, thinking for ensuring every child can thrive despite uncertainties that we will need to navigate.
Thanks so much for that question. And I can absolutely say that GPE is 100% invested, not just interested, but invested in enhancing literacy. I mean, that's one of the core tenets of the work we do with our country partners. And thinking about what was said about uncertainties, that is so real about the world we're in now. It could be a climate event, it could be conflict, it could be an emergency. There's so many things that can disrupt access to quality education literally overnight, and suddenly you can't get to school. So one thing that GPE is doing, and we have done, for example, over COVID, we gave out, we dispersed $500 million in grants to support countries to build distance learning systems, to establish infrastructure. And, you know, we know that not everywhere can have high-tech learning systems. So sometimes it's low-tech, sometimes it's radio learning, sometimes it's actually thinking of ways that some of these materials can be distributed. So for example, in Pakistan, there's a project that's ongoing to ensure that students in rural areas can have access to schools and to build some of these distance learning systems. So I'm happy to share a link to just share to show some of our work, but that's definitely something that we are 100% invested in. And we know that looking at the future, when you take a forward look, we have to be thinking more about, you know, an uncertain world and how to ensure that young children can thrive, and how to ensure that young children in secondary school can continue to access quality learning materials. And so that's something that we're really keen on doing in partnership with our country partners.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was working on a project for quality access to quality education here in Egypt, and it was even challenging to have a database for the students or to keep them enrolled in the schools. Ishaan, this question is coming for you. The question is, we are seeing interconsistency between international, national, and local curriculums. How can we hope to see better marriage between these systems in the future?
That's a good question. I can try and answer it as best as possible. I think, when it comes to internationally coordinated approaches, in terms of curriculum, which are often, or educational services.
It seems like we have a little bit of a technical issue with Ishaan. So until Ishaan comes back, we have another question for you, Foluyinka. The question is, how can we make education more inclusive? We have heard a lot about how school meal programs can help with this. What other methods should we be considering?
Thanks so much for that question. And that's something that we're also always thinking about at GPE in terms of building education systems that are inclusive and that can reach the furthest left behind, whether it's students living with disabilities or girls who live in rural areas. All these groups of people are those that we're always thinking how we can ensure that they're included in education systems. And like you said, school meal programs are one of the ways to make it possible for children to attend school, to reduce the opportunity cost on their family so they don't have to decide on whether a child goes out to work to earn money so they can eat, but a child can get food at school. And it also makes it better for them. They're better able to focus and learn when they're in school. Another thing that we're also doing is really working to make schools, buildings and infrastructure accessible to children with disabilities. And also thinking about what is an inclusive learning environment and how can we support countries to create inclusive learning environments across both, across different areas, different regions, and different parts of the country. Because the other thing is, what might work in one place, whatever the challenge might be, maybe it's more accessible buildings, might not work in another place, even within the same country. So we're really taking a very, very sort of tailored approach to make sure that the steps and the suggestions that we're making are relevant to each particular context. Something else that's also important for making learning inclusive is gender equality, and that's something that GPE prioritizes across all our engagements. We've hardwired gender, which means across every single operation, every single grant in every single country, there has to be gender considerations taken into account. We have to be thinking about bringing girls into school, keeping them in school, thinking about the challenges that they face, and making sure schools are safe environments for them. And so that's something that GP is absolutely committed to as well, again, depending on the needs of each particular country and in each region and what challenges they face.
Thank you so much. Ishaan, are you back?
I'm back. I think I might keep my camera off just for the moment, if that's okay. Obviously, the internet. Apologies.
Okay.
But in terms of the question on the curriculum, I think it's very hard for member states to gather and negotiate on what a curriculum should look like. There are so many contentious issues when it comes to education, particularly on gender transformative education, and every country will have their own context. And I think I'm not here to provide the solutions for how to what should be in a curriculum, for example, in a certain context. But I think what is important is that these curriculums are co-created and co-led by the people that they're targeted towards, and in particular young people, and in particular young women and girls who are facing multiple intersecting forms of discrimination, marginalization, and violence. It's got to be young person led. It's got to be in a safe environment. That these curriculums are co-created. And they have to be flexible, they have to be sustainable and adaptable too, because times are changing, every day. We have, for example, this year's Commission on the Status of Women was about technology, and one of the aspects was education in the digital age, that, technological innovation and development is rapidly evolving. And this means that so do we in our ways to sort of we have to innovate too in our approaches to how we're looking at education. And that's why, again, partnerships, that GPE forms as well are so crucial, because it's a learning journey for all of us, and that intergenerational learning is so crucial, because that means that collectively we're learning, but we're also unlearning and subsequently growing together as we advance towards this common goal of achieving quality education for all.
Amazing, thank you, Ishaan. So we are now coming to the end of our time together. I love the interaction from the participants. We have less than 2 minutes. In a few sentences, I would like for both of you to let us know what are your recommendations for young leaders for how they can make the greatest impact, specifically in the lead up to the SDG Summit. Foluyinka, if you can go first in a few sentences, and then we can have Ishaan over.
Sure, thank you so much. Honestly, the thing I would say to young leaders is use your voice, be loud and be present at every opportunity. As we've heard already today, some of the opportunities for young people to contribute. We've heard about the consultations that have happened and the insights paper and the consultations that will continue to happen. And I really just recommend that young people show up and really take advantage of these opportunities to feed into and to make sure that their voices are heard and that their concerns are noted, and that also, they follow up, after the moments, continue to follow up. And we have to make sure that, leaders are held accountable, commitments to commitments that they've made, and that there is follow-up and implementation. Thanks.
Thank you, Foluyinka. Ishaan?
100% echo exactly what Foluyinka said. That's really important. I think it's also the SDG Summit is going to be this pivotal intergovernmental moment. And I think for those of us who do have access to our decision makers, to our permanent mission, for example, in New York, to our capital ministers, it's really important that we do engage with them. It's important that we also recognize that it's very much a privilege to be able to directly engage with your government and your state. That we work with people every day who cannot, for a multitude of reasons, who cannot engage with their member state. Education activists are being repeatedly, and human rights defenders are being repeatedly persecuted. And it's a very hostile environment for civil society in general in these multilateral spaces at the moment. But for those of us who do have governments who are more receptive towards our participation as youth, it's about reaching out to them, it's about engaging them, but it's also about recognizing that in itself is a privilege. You do hold power, and to then bring the voices as well of those communities who can't reach out to their states into those conversations too. It's about sharing space, it's also about sharing power. But also as well, despite SDG Summit being an intergovernmental process, all of these intergovernmental processes that the UN runs are rendered useless if we're not localizing the agenda, if we're not bringing what the UN is churning out every day back to the grassroots level. And the SDG Summit is going to be very broad, it's going to be very wide, it's going to cover so much. And I think it's just about us as young people picking our area of passion, our niche, whatever we're most interested in, and bringing it back to the grassroots, bringing it back to the local level. As Foluyinka said, holding our state accountable, bringing it to very much the community level, within the home even, within your school, within the spaces that you occupy, and really realizing that actually implementation of these agendas is so crucial to catalyzing the action to achieve the 2030 agenda.
Thank you, Ishaan. Thank you, Foluyinka, for your great inputs. Thank you for our participants for their great interaction. Our session is coming to an end. I really like the recommendation of being loud and the fact that we have to select certain areas and certain moments to participate and to engage and to make the greatest impact. Youth and the children are the innovators and implementers. They can help to steer the societies towards more equitable and sustainable future. And finally, I reassure on the fact that quality education is interconnected and interdependent goal within the 17 SDGs. So thank you so much, and hopefully see you soon or see you in the ECOSOC Youth Forum, whether in person or virtually. And now I pass over to Taylor.
Thank you so much. I will pass straight across to Inez, who will be hosting our next panel discussion. Over to you.
Thank you, Taylor, and thank you, Foluyinka and Ishaan, for that Hello, everyone. How are we doing? I know it's already been over an hour. Also, you might need to stretch a little bit and get some more energy. I do hope you're enjoying this session, and I'm loving seeing the interaction in the chat and the Q&A. As was said, we weren't able to get to all the questions, but we encourage you to join the engine room to make sure that we can continue discussing on these topics. And I'm really excited to be having a conversation now with two amazing young change makers who I hope also inspire you, all of you, and also help you continue to take action for the SDGs and even more immediately at the ECOSOC Youth Forum as well. While we do have a chat, please engage with us through the chat function and also ask questions in the Q&A as you've been doing. You can also upvote other people's comments or questions if you had a similar thing you wanted to ask. And you can just do that by clicking the thumbs up on any of the questions in the Q&A. And if you haven't found the Q&A yet and you're on a computer, you can just click at the bottom of your screen and you should see something that says Q&A, and you can put your questions there. For those of you who have not engaged with yet, my name is MYCP, and I'm the lead Next Generation Fellow for the UN Foundation, working with the different fellows who lead your action groups on how we can engage as young people in the multilateral space, and also generating a movement of young changemakers, which is all of you. Being an effective young changemaker requires strategy and sustainability. If you can't sustain your actions, which has been said before on this call, then your impact will be limited. This is why we encourage you working actively in groups through the engine room. Not only do we go further together, but we can also support each other in trying to make sure no one burns out from this change-making journey. So do write in the chat as we start the ways that you're sustaining your actions and recommendations on how to ensure we're change-making sustainably while I introduce this fireside chat. So in this fireside, we will unpack the personal essentials for sustainable impact and the reflections of these two incredible activists on how they keep themselves and their missions focused. They are Isra Shakir, who's a Syrian-American civil rights activist, humanitarian advocate, and public speaker. She currently serves as a campaign strategist at the American Civil Liberties Union, where she leads national campaigns on issues including immigrants' rights, racial justice, and work related to the Arab, Middle East and Muslim and South Asian communities and indigenous people. That was a mouthful, but welcome, Isra. I'm so glad to have you here. And we also have Jamaad Bin with us, a basketball star and social media sensation. Jamaad quickly became an inspiration for young Muslim girls across the globe. Videos of her hopping on street courts in her hijab circulated the internet rapidly, receiving millions of views. And following her rise, she started Jamaad basketball camps to empower young girls to stay true to themselves. For Finn, her passion for the sport goes further than the game. Rather, it's a space in which young Muslim girls can achieve the same thing as anyone and beyond. She hopes to continue inspiring girls to follow their dreams. So welcome to you both, Isra and Jamaad, and let's jump right into some questions while we wait for some more to come through in our Q&A from the engine room. I will start with Isra. Given that this discussion is intended to focus more on the personal journey for young changemakers, can you please share a quick summary of your journey and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, everybody. I'm so excited to be back here with you all from the last time that I spoke, and it's been such an incredible opportunity to engage with youth leaders from around the world, change makers, people who are really pushing the narrative and changing our cultures to be one that better serves our communities inclusively and giving better access and equality across and equity across the board. I'm also excited to be here with my friend Jamaad, who's a friend of mine. So this is really awesome that we're in this conversation together. And I want to really just jump right in. My story and what brings me to do the advocacy and activism work that I do today is really rooted in a personal one. Growing up Muslim in America was not easy for me, especially being visibly Muslim in a town that didn't really have a lot of Muslims. And I experienced a lot of Islamophobia and bullying from a young age. And specifically in high school, I had people calling me derogatory names every day. I had people trying to rip off my hijab. I had people leaving nasty notes in my locker, all referencing really stereotypical and inflammatory, verbiage and vernacular against my family and against my faith in particular. So I quickly realized that the bullying was getting so bad that I had to do something about it. And I decided to do where I use my most powerful tool, which was my voice, to do that. And so I created a conversation initiative called Diversity Panel, which brought together students who were different in every way, whether in any identity, right? Racially, ethnically, religiously, ability, it didn't matter. All were welcome to come share their stories in front of our incoming freshman classrooms. And part of that was to own our narrative, right? Part of the effort there was to ensure that to change the culture at the school and to make it inclusive and welcoming to all students, because I knew I wasn't the only one being bullied. I may have been the only one being bullied for my hijab and being Muslim, but that wasn't the reason why everyone else was being bullied. So I created this initiative where we came together and shared our stories. And then afterwards, we would have a reflective conversation with a guidance counselor where people would share their thoughts and their feedback to what they heard. And I remember walking into the first one at 14 years old, we were all terrified and nervous because there's so much that can happen, right? When you share your story, you can either be, you're putting yourself in a more vulnerable position, so the bullying can even become worse, or, they can essentially use that against you. They can laugh at you. There were so many risks, but we knew that it was all worth it to do that in order to make a difference in the world that we were living in. So we shared our stories, and I'll never forget, after we shared our stories, the walls being broken down and feeling the energy shift in that room, and people in this conversation outing themselves as bullies, not to the people on the panel, but to people who represented the same identities as the people on the panel. And people saying that they commit themselves to never do this again, where you had other people sharing that they could relate to the exact same bullying experiences many of us were sharing, but not necessarily because they were Muslim, but because they had, another identity. And so Diversity Panel was so successful that I was asked to do it for all classes, not just incoming freshman classes. So by the time I graduated, I had shared my story to over 3,000 students. And so I really discovered my voice in high school, and I continue to recognize my purpose in bringing people together for social change and making a difference in the world that we are. And there's so many more stories and parts of that, of how it got through my college years, my transformative years, to my early professional career, and to where I am today, over 10 years into my career, working on social justice issues, fighting for the rights of immigrants and those who are misrepresented and underrepresented, and more importantly, really being proud of my Muslim identity and owning my voice and not being afraid to use it and not allowing society to diminish it and take that away from me, because I know my purpose in this world, and I'm really, really motivated by that. And that's essentially what brings me here today. And that was like the fastest summary of my life story. But I want everyone to take away from this that please recognize the power of your voice, no matter where you come from, no matter what identities you carry. You are so powerful and you can move mountains. You just have to believe in yourself and do it.
Thank you so much, Isra. And I can echo what Sanaya said in the chat. What a powerful story. I'm really sad to hear what you had to go through, but I'm also inspired by the action you took. And I'm sure it's created change for many other young people to have an inclusive space. And the numbers you shared were also so impressive. In the engine room, we do have a code of conduct. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, we also encourage participants of the engine room to follow that and encourage all to make a difference positively. I'm going to turn to Jamad now. And I would love to hear from you a quick summary on your journey and how you got here.
Thank you, Inez. It's wonderful to be here. Hi, Isra. So my life story basically began when I was, I started playing basketball at a really young age. I think I was 13. And it was difficult for me at first because my parents weren't really open to it. And it was very different in our society for Muslim girls to play basketball. So especially from being a child of immigrant parents, it's very different for them to see their children assimilating to the Western culture. So my mom was very hesitant on me playing, and then my dad was supporting me. And luckily, with his support, I got to convince my mom to play. And then I played throughout my whole high school career. And it was different because I was the only girl who like dressed differently on my team. Like any team that I went to, I was the only girl who stuck out because of the clothes that I wore. But at a really young age, I decided, I told myself that I no longer wanted to stand out just because of how I looked, and I wanted to stand out because of my skill level. So that's what really motivated me to get better and to be that representation for Muslim girls who do play sports, because, you know, I can't be on the court, be a representation of a Muslim girl and like not do well. So that really motivated me to do better. And alhamdulillah, like I played in college. I'm looking to play overseas now. And I started Jamaat basketball camps for girls just like me, who I know how they felt growing up. I know how out of place they were and how difficult it was for them to find a gym that was just open to just them. And also for role models, like I didn't have any role models growing up that looked like me that played basketball. So for me to be that for them is really important to me. And I'm so grateful to be in a position to give back to them. And yeah, very happy.
Thank you so much, Jamand. And I see a thread on what you both shared about self-confidence, your own uniqueness, and also powering through adversity. So I would like to go to the next question on self-confidence. And let's start with Jamad, you first, and then Isra. What are your relationships with your own self-confidence like? And how has this served you or challenged you in your journey?
It started rough at first because I wasn't confident in the way that I played basketball, like at the beginning of my journey. But gradually, as I'd gone forward, I realized like who I was doing it for, what I was representing. And that made me become better within basketball, which is through hard work. Like every day I would be in the gym, like before school, after school. I don't think I had a life other than basketball. So like that's what really grew my confidence with the sport. And also I was very a shy, reserved kid growing up, and basketball really helped with that. And I became like, my confidence started to show like every year, year after year. And not through just basketball, but just through life in general. And I'm very grateful for how sports can do that for these young girls. So like, that's why I always encourage them to play sports so that they can gain more self-confidence. And I think sports is a very big factor in the lives of these kids, like the children growing up. And so for them to have somebody who encourages them to play sport, I think they should always look forward to that and be part of programs that love sports and love giving back.
Brilliant, Jamal. And I can see people saying, let's go, beautiful articulation, even asking if you want to start a sports hijab line. So there might be things you want to explore as well, but I'll hand over to Isra as well on your relationship with your own self-confidence and how it served you or challenged you in your journey.
You know, self-confidence is something that is so personal to oneself. And, you know, you probably think that it's an obvious thing, but it's actually not. To me, it's about not allowing the external world to affect how you feel about yourself. And by that, really leading with your intentions and really knowing your purpose and staying true to that purpose. That's how I've been able to, you know, utilize my self-confidence for the growth and the success that I've been able to achieve. But a lot of that is also rooted in my faith. And I will, you know, I can't not include that in this conversation, especially being the month of Ramadan. My faith teaches me to be a good steward to the world, to speak truth to power, to be an example for justice and positive change. And so when that is the rooted anchor in me, I feel very confident in my abilities and all the work that I do, because it comes back to that intention. It comes back to that anchor. But that being said, I think we can all agree that confidence, insecurities are all things that we deal with, you know, in our lives. It ebbs and flows. There are moments in your life where you feel like you're feeling yourself, you're feeling excited, you're in the right role, you're doing the right work, and you feel really confident in that. And there are also times where you're going through a challenge and you're going through a tough time and you're being tested in a way, and that naturally you feel less confident, you feel more insecure in those positions in life. What I will tell you is that what I've always realized is everything is fleeting, everything is temporary. So in those moments when you are being challenged, remind yourself that you will get there, that it will be figured out, that you will get in a better position for yourself. And the moments where you are really confident and you're feeling like you're in the really successful position, always remind yourself that you have to keep maintaining that same energy and that same presence, that same work style, but also how do you welcome other people into that space? How do you help other people get to that position? You know, it's all about how you give back and how you open up your journey to be able to support other people's journeys. So just, it's the natural way of life, ebbs and flows. And even if you see people super confident online, for example, or you look at me and say, wow, she's so well-spoken, she looks like she really understands herself. I want you to be like, the reality is, as every human being, we all go through those ebbs and flows. We all have challenges. And the best way to get through those challenges is to know that it's temporary, to be patient, to stay focused on what your purpose is and keep trying. You know, persistence and determination is everything. And the most important thing to me is really leaning into my faith, leaning into my support system, finding people who are going to build me up and support me, and really leaning into that group to do the best that I possibly can and to be the best version of myself that I can possibly be.
Thank you both for sharing your stories, and I can hear recommendations on finding what builds up our confidence and what makes us shine, and also sharing that it's not instant, but we can continue to grow in our authentic selves, taking action on our ideas and beliefs. And that's hard. Making the transition from an idea into action feels like an incredibly big leap, and especially for young people. And I think in some of the questions earlier, we even have some teens in the room who are asking how they can be more involved. What is your advice for how to overcome the hurdle of idea to action and really make these big steps feel manageable? Let me go to Isra first this time.
So this is a question that I deal with every day of my life as a campaigner. That is the question, is that we have these goals, for example, that we want to achieve. We have this policy we want to change. We have a narrative shift that we want to see in, you know, the American public and ex-public, wherever it is in the world. And how do we do that is the question that any campaigner wants to deal with. So as a campaign strategist, I'm constantly thinking through, here's my goal, make it as specific as possible. So SMARTY, I'm sure you've all heard of SMART goals, but SMARTY goals are where you're very specific, very measurable. So when you have a big policy idea or big goal, you have to find a way in order to implement, to actually achieve it, find a way to really summarize it in a very specific way. So make something very specific, time bound, give yourself a timeline on this, and then start thinking through from there how you're going to make that achieve it. And you're going to feel a lot less overwhelmed right away when you take it from a really big goal to very specific and measurable goal and objective. It becomes a lot easier to process and think through. From there, you have to really think about what value add you bring. Why are you doing this, right? Setting your intention straight from the get-go. What value do you want to change in the system? Why is it important that you work on this issue versus another organization or another person? Once you really have that really strong idea, that's your pitch and how you're going to get people to buy into it and get people to support you in your journey to do this. Then you have to figure out who you're trying to influence, right? So this objective, this policy goal, whatever it may be, there's somebody who's a decision maker or a group of people that are decision makers to make that change happen. Is it the member of Congress? Is it the White House? Is it the administration? Is it, you know, ex-prime minister somewhere, whatever it may be? Or is it your school board like I had, or their principal like in my school days? So it can be as small or as big, but there is a decision maker, and that person who's your people is who you're going to try to influence. So you have to then map out how you're going to influence that person. So it's not just about, okay, how do I get to do this work and just be public about it? But you have to be very intentional and strategic about how you're going to actually get the change. And you'll create your plan based on the specific measurable timeline and the person you're trying to influence. And the most important thing is, like, change comes in numbers, right? You can't just do this alone. You can't carry the burden of these issues in the world that we're dealing with alone. So how do you get people to support your cause and buy into it? That's where your specific outreach to your friends, your community, your colleagues comes in. That's how you get petitions going. You know, there's power in numbers. Getting as many people as possible through the different tactics that you want to launch that will get you to that goal and influence that decision maker. Maybe it's driving calls to the member of Congress's office, which I do all the time. Maybe it's driving petition signatures, you know, submitting 10,000 plus signatures on an issue to show them that there's a scale, there's people interested in making this change. Maybe it's using social media. And specifically calling out on op-eds or using earned media opportunities to highlight the issue and why it's important for us to make this change now. Or maybe it's a combination of all these things, right? So tactics, and that's just basically the means of how you're going to do it. You can incorporate as many as you want, but as long as it makes sense, right? And really thinking through, again, strategically, what's going to be the most efficient way to get the change I want. And following through on that front. So that to me is when you take an idea to implementation, it's those steps. It's that thoughtfulness, that nimbleness, but also being able to be open to ideas and feedback and open to suggestions and also open to the change of the world that we're in, right? One day we can be working really clearly on an issue. The next day, a humanitarian disaster strikes, a political conflict strikes. And how do we pivot and how do we make ourselves, nimble and adaptable to those changes? It's all part of that strategy. So a lot of it is really being focused, really being specific, being intentional. But then the other part of it is as your personality and as a leader, being nimble, being adaptable, being agile is all critical to being able to make this work happen and making change happen.
Thank you so much, Isra. So much insight into how young people can take action and so many great skills shared. I know we're running out of time, but I would love to go to you, Jamaad, as well to answer how you feel young people can take that leap and what skills you think young leaders need to achieve the SDGs.
I think definitely what Isra was saying, the power in numbers is such a big deal through anything that you do in life. But it was funny to see because when I was growing up, I thought I was the only girl who only Muslim girl who played basketball ever, which was very wrong. But there's other girls in different cities who played basketball, but they and it was sort of, and I think when one of my videos went viral, it was different because they didn't know other girls like them were out there. And then it created a whole spiral of girls coming out, showing that they too play basketball. And then luckily I became friends with those girls. We played on our national team in countries in Africa together. And now we're traveling in different cities and trying to encourage more girls to come. But it's definitely, if I didn't have those girls with me, who also love the same things that I do and who are the same people like me, it would have been much harder. And my advice for the young leaders would definitely be to find your niche and something you care about, something that you'll want to spend your life with. And that really motivates you also, because I know how it felt for young girls to not have a place to play basketball, not have a gym where it was just them, it was just boys in the gym and them feeling out of place. So it was, it's good to have other girls with me that relate to that and who can spread the message to the young girls that we meet in the different cities. But definitely just finding what you love and really making sure that it resonates to you, and then to find other people who also love the same thing that you do and who care about it as much as you do.
Thank you so much, Jamaad and Isra, for joining us in this engine room meet. I know we could have kept this conversation going, but I'm also conscious of time and a few more elements on our agenda. It's been great to see the engagement in the chat. I'm definitely ending this segment with more inspiration, desire for action, and looking forward to more spaces to connect and collaborate. I'm also taking away some recommendations for all of us to stay true to our values, learn to network, not give up on our journey, find what we care about, and continue to be nimble in this journey with twists and turns. In my language, in Spanish, we say inesperado, which fortuitously includes my name, but basically that means unexpected. And I find our journeys as young people is that, unexpected with many twists and turns, and we should remain nimble to that. But with that, I will hand over to Danley, who will share a bit more about how we can mobilize together as the engine room ahead of the SDG Summit. Over to you, Danley.
Thank you so much, Inez. That was amazing. Hello, everybody. My name is Danley. I'm a member of the Our Future Agenda team and work on social media to support the work of the engine room. I'm here very excited to introduce some wonderful opportunities to amplify your voice as an engine room member and to spotlight your personal stories and inspiring projects with the public. As we all know, the United Nations will host its second SDG Summit this September. During this global gathering, world leaders will come together to drive collective action to the implementation of the 2030 agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals. With 5 months to go to the SDG Summit, we will join world leaders to review how much progress has been made and set new benchmarks for the last chapter of the 2030 agenda to support effective mobilization of young changemakers for this big moment. Our future agenda will be inviting young activists across the networks of the Unlock Coalition, Next Generation Fellows, and the Engine Room to get involved in the Our SDG Stories social media campaign. This will be an opportunity to write stories about how the SDGs are relevant to your personal lives and present your narratives to global thinkers and decision makers, as well as people who want to be a part of this change. And for this campaign, we're looking for young people to create a short video or write a brief paragraph to tell their SDG stories. We want to know if there was a scenario or someone in the past that has influenced you to recognize the importance of an SDG topic, or what you have seen in your community that leads to the project you're currently working on. We also hope to hear about the changes we wish to see in the near future. And today, for everyone on this call, we're giving you exclusive first access to participate before it is opened up to the public. To participate in the Our SDG Story campaign, please submit a 30 to 60 second video or a paragraph up to 150 words through the Google form. The link to the form will be shared in the chat by our team. After your submissions, our team will then carefully review and select the most compelling stories to be featured on our Future Agenda website and other platforms. As an Engine Room member, there are also other actions that you can take. You have the unique opportunity to write a blog or create a video introducing your projects and publish them on our website and other social platforms. Some of you have already, but if you're interested in sharing your content, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or your action group lead. And we can't wait to read your stories and sharing inspiring ideas with a wide audience around the globe. We want to thank you in advance for your efforts in telling the stories about the SDGs and representing the voice of young people as we're heading to the SDG Summit. I'll now hand over to our amazing Taylor to introduce some more upcoming opportunities.
Thank you, Danley. Oh, well, firstly, well done to everyone who has made it this far during the call. I have had the most wonderful time. I'm feeling inspired. There's been lots of insight, and I hope everyone's feeling the same. But now we have a nice meaty final section, but we're in the final stretch, which is talking about what now. If you're anything like me, you're feeling excited, you want to know what to do with all of that energy, and do not fear, we are about to tell you. So we're going to dive into a bit of a discussion of the upcoming opportunities, ways for you to engage in a lot of different ways, and we hope that while you are motivated, you can capitalize on those. So first, we will hear from Himija Nagareddy, who is the 11th Youth Observer to the UN from the US. Over to you, Himija.
Thank you so much, Taylor. And it's been such an incredible opportunity today to just hear from everyone's insights. You all are incredible young change makers. Everyone on this call is an incredible change maker. And it's so incredible that we're growing this family to support one another on our advocacy journeys to recognize human rights for everyone. And on that note, wanted to share a really exciting opportunity for you all to take part in. One thing that we've been doing at UNA USA, which stands for the United Nations Association of the USA, is we're putting together a series of working groups, consultations. We're still workshopping the name, but really these types of strategic planning sections that are themed on priorities that we've gleaned are of key importance to young people from our listening tour, which we hosted in the fall. So we put together a series of consultations, which we'd love for you all to take part in, and I can put the link in the chat right after. These consultations span topics such as health and well-being, good quality education, all of the SDGs plus more. And we're hoping that you all take part, because all the feedback that we get will go into an iconic document that we're creating and releasing on International Human Rights Day in December, called the Declaration of Rights by American Youth. And we're hoping that this sparks a movement in other countries as well for young people to really document and share the rights that they feel like are key for us to recognize. And this really builds on the UDHR. One classic example is the UDHR talks about peace and security as being a fundamental human right, which many of us young people feel, but doesn't really delve into online peace and security, which for us as young people is one of our biggest areas of human rights violations when it comes to our online privacy, especially for women and girls, online security. And so thinking about ways that we can highlight specific youth rights that need to be prioritized within our US and UN leadership is something that we're currently working on as part of the Youth Observer program. So gonna put the link in the chat. And if anyone wants to follow up, if you're interested in kind of starting your own series of consultations, working groups to put together a similar declaration within your own state, country, would love to connect with you and see how we can work together. And I will pass it back to you, Taylor.
Thank you so much. Yet another example of young people doing incredible things. I will now share a quick update from one of our Unlock Coalition partners, who unfortunately had to sneak out for another call, but at the ECOSOC Youth Forum on the 26th of April at 1:30, Restless Development will be hosting an in-person youth consultation towards this year's Global Education Monitoring Report. This report is a flagship annual report curated by UNESCO that monitors progress in education towards the SDGs. So if you will be at the ECOSOC Youth Forum in person, please do reach out to Alice, who is one of our incredible Next Generation Fellows. She's about to drop her email in the chat, and she'll be able to give you a bit more information. However, we are very aware that being able to attend in person to these events is actually something that a very small amount of people can do. So Restless is also focused on making engagement in these sorts of opportunities available from anywhere in the world. So they'll be running a series of virtual consultations and other opportunities, which Alice will also be able to share information on if you would like to follow up on that. The next thing that I would love to share a bit about is, once again, zooming out, because we are incredibly focused on ECOSOC Youth Forum right now being just a week away, but I want to make sure that we're peppering the rest of the year into how we're talking about things. So I want to introduce the HLPF event, which is the High Level Political Forum, which will be running from the 10th to the 19th of July. And that is our second pit stop event. So as soon as ECOSOC Youth Forum is over, we're all going to start thinking about this next event, which will come up incredibly quickly. The gap between the two is very small. The theme will be accelerating the recovery from COVID-19 and the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. At this event, 5 core goals will be brought into focus for in-depth review. This will include Goal 6, clean water and sanitation, Goal 7, affordable and clean energy, Goal 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, 11, sustainable cities and communities, and 17, partnerships for the goals. So there's a lot of reasons that this matters, but a really key one is that we'll have the opportunity to witness growing global commitment to the advancement of the SDGs, with 40 countries carrying out VNRs, which are voluntary national reviews. Now, these VNRs are really important for a few different reasons. I know at the offset, they may not seem like the most revolutionary thing, but what they do is they help to improve the evidence and the data on the SDGs. So they give us more material and information for how we can improve their implementation going forward. So it's really game changing. And they also help to strengthen policies and institutions for governments to monitor their progress. So engagement with them is incredibly promising. HLPF will not only be a great opportunity for action groups working in the hyper-relevant areas to leverage this political moment to advance their work, but because it's another pit stop for the engine room, we'll all be ramping up our efforts. So I would love to see and hear about different efforts that all of the action groups, be they climate or future gen, on how you want to strategically use HLPF to your strategic advantage. Please speak to your Next Generation Fellows about it. If you're not already in an action group, please join one and ask lots of questions about all of these pit stops and how they can be relevant to you and your work, and how you can capitalize on that as a moment of energy and focus for the global agenda. And with that, we're now about to enter into our last segment for the conversation, which is a few really practical actions that you can take for engagement. And for that, I'm going to pass over to Inez.
Thank you. Oops. I believe. There you go. I was having some issues with my technology and you seeing me. But thank you so much, Taylor, for those opportunities. And it's great to hear. I know many of you were very interested in how to take action. So incredible news, the deadline for registration for virtual participation in the ECOSOC Youth Forum has been extended. This means that for those who didn't yet get the chance or inspiration has now struck, you have until the 21st of April to register to participate, and you'll see that in the chat. You can also take part in our SDG story, which Danley shared earlier. So make sure to click on that form and fill it out. We'll share it again. I think I saw Omer in the chat earlier, and he's from Southern Voice, a member of the Unlock the Future Coalition. They're organizing a pitching contest for young think tankers from the Global South. The aim is to promote collaboration among young researchers and policy professionals working within think tanks from Africa, Asia, and Latin America and the Caribbean. Young scholars can apply to the pitching contest until the 31st of May. Shortlisted participants will be invited to a virtual event in September to present their 3-minute pitches to a jury, and these should feature practical and applicable solutions to improve collaboration among young think tankers of the Global South. 3 winners will be invited to showcase their ideas at the Southern Voice Conference in October 2023 in Kenya, and all travel expenses will be covered by Southern Voice. So I am certainly excited about this opportunity. Don't miss out the opportunity to share your ideas, network, and contribute to the future of the Global South. Please use the link in the chat, which was shared earlier, but can be shared again to find out more and submit your application. Your action groups are also meeting at least monthly, so make sure you're joining those. The link has been shared multiple times to join the engine room, so if you haven't signed that, please make sure you do so. And we will also be having an engine room meet with all of us in July before HLPF. But I'm conscious that on just this call, you've seen that it's been a lot of people talking at you, but the engine room is a space also where you can talk with each other. So make sure you're joining those action group calls and interacting in them, continuing the questions we weren't able to get to earlier, and really bringing your solutions to life. We also have a document that many of you have been looking at on opportunities for young change makers, which we're updating regularly. So although we have these calls only once in a while, you're welcome to click on this link that I'm putting in the chat as well to see opportunities that we're sharing regularly. And of course, we'll keep getting our newsletter if you're signed up to the engine room with opportunities to engage. Many of you were asking in the chat and in the Q&A if you'll be able to get presentations, if you'll be able to see what has been shared, because I'm conscious it was a lot of information. So we will make sure to share this with you as soon as we can. In the meantime, we hope to be able to continue to engage with you in the road to ECOSOC, and also in the engine room itself, in the different initiatives that you heard of, and the ones that weren't able to present today. A lot is going on in this space. We're pretty much right on time. We're so grateful that you joined us. We'll keep this call a little bit open a little bit more if there's anything else we need to address in the chat. But otherwise, thank you so much for being a part of this journey. And we hope to see you in our following meetings through the action groups, the engine room, and the ECOSOC Youth Forum. Take care, everyone, and we will see you soon.